Okay. In alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. We're continuing with our topic of how to benefit from the mistakes made by the companions. Again, Allah made their lives examples for all of us because they were the best of us. Even their bad choices and how they overcame them, how they dealt with them, are all lessons that we can learn from. And we've been speaking about what happened with Muawiyah and Ali. This was all after the brutal murder of Uthman. We stopped off with how Ali arrived in Syria with his army of men, the majority of whom were responsible in rebelling against Uthman and his murder. Ali and Muawiyah both wanted the same thing. They wanted vengeance. They wanted vengeance for what these people had done to Uthman, but their approaches were different. Muawiyah was ruled by his anger and couldn't see that Ali wanted the same thing he wanted. It's just that Ali's hands were basically tied because he was amongst the rebels themselves. Okay, and they were still in control. We talked about how when they met on the battlefield, neither group wanted to fight each other. Ali and Muawiyah spent 2 months trying to resolve their differences peacefully. However, the rebels played a role in trying to prevent this from happening. Okay, we talked about how Ali's men ended up turning on him, which Ali was not really surprised because, again, his army of 90,000 men consisted mainly of the people responsible for murdering Uthman. So he knew he couldn't trust these men. Okay, but they ended up turning on him, flipping sides, and going over to Muawiyah's side. Why? Because Muawiyah had sent a contingent of men on the battlefield holding verses of the Quran on their swords. Ali knew that this was a trick that Muawiyah was doing to try to turn the tide of events, because at that point Ali had the upper hand. So Ali told his men, don't fall for that. Continue to fight. Do not fall for that trick. But his men chose to not listen to him. They said, we're not going to go out here and fight men who are holding Qurans on their swords. And they said, the fact that you want us to do that means that you don't deserve to be the leader of the Muslims. So they turned against Ali, disrespected him, turned against him. And that's where we stopped off yesterday. Let's pick up from there. Okay? Because of the treachery of his own men, Ali was no longer in control of his army. He had to think to do something to try to put these rebels in check, because 20,000, which is half of his army, rebelled against him. Okay, so he was very, he wasn't surprised, but he was very hurt and very worried as to what to do. When the men turned against Ali, they forced him to appoint someone to go and ask Muawiyah what the significance of what was the significance of putting the Quran on his sword. And what they did was they appointed a man named Ashas ibn Qais to go and ask Muawiyah why he was doing this. And Ashas went and asked Muawiyah. And Muawiyah said the significance of this display of the leaves of the Quran is that we appeal from the decision to fight, and instead we want to try to resolve this peacefully again. He said, let both sides retreat from the battlefield and let us instead appoint 2 arbitrators, one from each side. And those arbitrators will decide based on the Quran and the Hadith as to who the victor of this battle should be. Now, instead of Ashes going back to Ali, telling him what Muawiyah said, instead Ashes gave his consent without even consulting Ali. So you can see the brutality of these men. He didn't even go and consult with Ali and tell Ali what Muawiyah wanted. He sat there and accepted Muawiyah's proposal and said, okay, what we'll do is we'll go and appoint someone to be our arbitrator, and we'll meet with your arbitrator and we'll decide who should win. So this is the disrespect that Ali's men showed him. And who was Ashis? Well, he was a convert. He had converted to Islam during the time of the Prophet. But after the Prophet had died, he had apostated. Ashis was involved in the apostasy wars in which Abu Bakr fought against. What happened was, after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had died, people thought they could change the religion. No longer did people want to pay the zakat. So there were a lot of tribes of Arabs who refused to pay the yearly zakat. And Abu Bakr had to wage war against them. He told them, you know, whenever we refuse to do one of the tenets of faith, you have invalidated your belief in Allah. Zakat is something imposed upon us by Allah. To say that you don't accept it means you're no longer a Muslim. You have apostated from the religion and your blood is no longer sacred. So Ashis was one of the people who had apostated after the death of the Prophet during the caliphate of Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr fought against him. And what happened was Ashis ended up repenting. He was defeated by Abu Bakr and his men, and he ended up converting back to Islam. And when he converted back to Islam, he married Abu Bakr's sister, Farida. Okay, so that's who Ashis ibn Qais was. And after Abu Bakr died, during the time of Umar, Ashis participated in the wars against the Persians. But Umar never trusted him and didn't give him no office. But after Umar died and was replaced by Uthman, Uthman made Ashis a governor. He was one of Uthman's governors. But when Ali became the caliph, he removed all of Uthman's governors, including Ashis. Okay? So Ali had removed him as a governor, but made him a general of his army in Kufa. So that's a little bit of background on who Ashis was. Okay? In the beginning, Ashis showed a great deal of loyalty to Ali. But as you can see now, he showed that his loyalty was not to him at all. Because instead of him going back to Ali, telling him what it was that Muawiyah wanted, he chose to accept Muawiyah's plans without even consulting with Ali. And when Ali found out that Ashis had betrayed him like this, he was very angry, because this was outright treachery. But this wasn't the first time that Ashis had, the first or only time that Ashis had betrayed Ali. Ashis' daughter, one of his daughters, was married to Hassan, who was the son of Ali, the Prophet Muhammad's grandson. And she had poisoned Hassan at the instigation of Yazid, who had promised to marry her if she would poison Hassan. And so she had poisoned Hassan, but Yazid did not marry her. He said, how could he marry a woman who would poison her own husband? Okay, so again, you know, this was not the only time that Ashis had betrayed, proved to be a treacherous person. His daughter was the one was married to Hassan, Ali's son, and had poisoned him. That's just a little bit of background information on who Ashis was and his family or whatnot. But anyway, the thing that you guys need to remember is that he betrayed Ali. He did not share with Ali the proposal of Muawiyah. Instead, he chose to accept Muawiyah's proposal without him. And then after accepting Muawiyah's proposal, Ashas then went into negotiations with Muawiyah on behalf of the army. When the arbitration deed came to be written up, an argument between both groups occurred. They argued over the first sentence of their a preamble because some of the men refused to refer to Ali as commander over the Muslims. They did not want to recognize him as being the caliph. Okay, so they argued over that. So, but anyway, the agreement was drawn up, providing for a truce between both of the parties. They had two umpires, one from each side, that was appointed, and they would decide who should be the winner of this war. Okay, and the umpires were required to give their decision within 6 months. So here you can see this is what was going on. This is what was happening here. Okay, and poor Ali had no hand in this at all. This was all Ashas doing this without his approval or consent. And that arbitration deed was nothing short of a death warrant for Ali. The same way these rebels had murdered Uthman and had no allegiance to him, they didn't have one allegiance towards Ali either. And that's the thing, you know, they claim to have such love and devotion for Ali, but they didn't. They forced him to be leader. They threatened his life if he would not accept it. Okay, and here, you know, they're showing that he's nothing. They didn't even want to acknowledge him as being the caliph. So Ali was placed in a helpless situation. And even though he was placed in a helpless situation, he had to go with whatever these men had written up. Okay, and that's what he had to do. And even in the choosing of the umpire, they would not even allow Ali to choose who the umpire was for his men. He wanted his cousin, Abdullah ibn Abbas, to be the arbiter. But the rebels wouldn't allow him to appoint him. They said, you can't appoint Abdullah ibn Abbas. He's related to you. So then Ali said, well, let me appoint Malik Ashtar. Malik Ashtar. He said he was one of the rebels. They wouldn't even allow him to appoint Malik Ashtar because they said he participated in the war and he wouldn't be neutral. So the rebels on their own nominated Abu Musa Ash'ari to represent them. And Ali said this would not be fair because remember, Abu Musa Ash'ari, you know, had a personal vendetta with Ali because Ali had removed him as governor over Kufa. But the rebels said, forget that. Abu Musa Ash'ari is one of the eminent companions. He's known for being just. They said, we're going to make him the arbiter. And that's what they did. So Ali had no choice in the matter at all. He had to accept what his rebellious, treacherous men did and appointed for him. But on the other side, Muawiyah appointed his arbiter. He appointed Amir ibn al-As. And no one objected to him, even though he had participated in the war and had developed certain prejudices. Okay, so you see, you know, this is what happens when you have an army of men that you can't trust. And this was the point that Ali wanted everyone to see, beginning with Aisha and Talha and Zubair, what they did to this nation, what they did to Uthman, what they did to us as a whole. But I can't. They're in power. They're in control. I need you guys to unite with me, support me. They forced this position upon me as caliph. Well, I'm going to adhere to it for the sake of Allah, but I need y'all to help me, back me. Let us stand together and let us get control over what these rebels have done, and then we can bring to justice those responsible for this mess. That's all Ali wanted everyone to see, but no one was catching on to this. Just like Aisha didn't see it, poor Talha and Zubair, who had been killed, didn't see it. Now Muawiyah didn't see it either. Okay? So after the arbitration agreement was written up and agreed to, both sides had to leave the battlefield because they agreed that there would be no more fighting. They would give the arbiters 6 months to decide, what should be done, who should be the victor of this mess and all that. Okay? Ali had no choice but to leave the battlefield. Okay, he had been betrayed by his men. There have been heavy losses on both sides. Again, Ali was still suffering with, grieving over Ammar ibn Yasir. Ammar ibn Yasir being murdered, his death still plagued Ali. So Ali was going through all of that too, the grieving, the many eminent companions' lives, destroyed. And don't forget, Ali still never got over the loss of Abu Talha and Zubair. He still, was hoping that Aisha would make it through her depression. So here we can see only a generation had passed since the death of the Prophet, and already the Muslims had lost their Islamic character, and they were, regressing back to the days before Islam. Ali had to contend with all of this. So Ali and his men retreated from the battlefield. They went back to Kufa to allow the arbiters to decide who the victory should go to. And when Ali arrived back in Kufa, he found that the city had been plunged in gloom and grief. Almost every home in Kufa had lost a man, and so there were many women. The women in the city of Kufa were mourning their dead men, their sons, and that made Ali feel bad. So many lives killed, so many lives wasted, Muslims fighting Muslims, Muslims killing Muslims, not even fighting against non-Muslims. So Ali had to deal with that. And so what Ali did was he went to the mosque and he ordered all the people to come to the mosque, and he gave a speech to them, letting the women know that he felt bad for what happened to them. He would try to help everyone to get through this. And he also explained how he had been betrayed, how his men, his army betrayed him. He explained to them how he was not in control, how the rebels had taken control. So he tried to calm the people down and tried to get the people to stand together and try to, avenge the truth and all that. So this is where we are right now. Ali is in Kufa. No choice but to be. Okay? Trying to calm down the people, trying to maintain the laws of Islam, while his men were out betraying him, revolting. And this is where we're going to stop off at today. So again, I want you guys to see, it just, everything went downhill in Islam after Umar. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had told us that this would happen. The strength of this nation, would be Abu Bakr and Umar. And after them, everything would go downhill. And that's what's happening. It all went downhill during the caliphate of Uthman. The people betrayed him. The people murdered him, lied on him. Then it went down even further with Ali. And that's why in Islam, we don't go past that. We don't care about the caliphate of anyone that came after Ali. It doesn't matter. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us there will be many leaders over the Muslims. But the only ones that we should concern ourselves with are the first four. Because the first four, they were the ones that were guided by Allah. And those first four were Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. So what happened after Ali? That's why we don't care. We don't study it. Who cares about the Ottoman Empire and all that crap? There's nothing. They were not the first four rightly guided caliphs. The Prophet said, follow and adhere to the first four rightly guided caliphs. Because what comes after them are not rightly guided. Not as guided as these four are. These were guided by Allah. Okay? So here you can see everything the Prophet ﷺ had said that would come to pass after his death is already in the making. And you can see Ali is thinking about when they saw the death of Ammar. That was a reminder. So imagine the depression that Ali was faced with. Imagine the depression that the other companions were faced with too. People like Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abu Huraira, and all of them. Now, Abu Huraira, Ibn Abbas, and them, they chose to not take sides. They stayed back in Medina, like the Prophet said to do, trying to stay out of this mess. But they were depressed too because they knew what was happening, and this is a bad time for us. You know, so, you know, this is something that we need to ponder. So we're going to stop right here for today. Tomorrow I'm going to give you a quiz over this, and then we'll move on. What happened? What did those arbiters decide? What did the two groups decide to give the victory to? And what were the conditions? What happened to Ali? What happened with Muawiyah? Did they ever make up? Who took the power? We're going to talk about that the next time we meet. So we'll stop right here. If you guys have any questions or comments, inshallah, you can type them on